For 5,000 years, we've done some pretty incredible things for gold. We've built entire empires, we've fought brutal wars, we have crossed oceans for it. People have literally died for it. And yet, when you really get right down to it, it's just a shiny rock.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What is it about this one particular metal that has captivated everyone from the ancient pharaohs all the way to the modern Federal Reserve? Well, to figure that out, we first need to take a step back and understand what makes for good money in the first place.
See, for anything to really work as a store of value, it has to have a few key qualities. First, it has to be rare, right? You can't just be able to make more of it out of thin air. Otherwise, it becomes worthless. It also needs to be durable, so it won't rot or rust away over time. And hey, it helps if it's easy to recognize, easy to divide, and, well, pretty. And as it turns out, gold just happens to tick every single one of those boxes perfectly. And our obsession with it started early. I mean, really early. Around 3000 BC, the Egyptians were convinced that gold was the literal flesh of their sun god, Ra. Then, you fast forward a bit to 600 BC, and the Kingdom of Lydia completely revolutionizes trade by minting the world's very first standardized gold coins. But by 100 AD, the Romans, who were starting to run out of gold to pay their massive army, got a little too clever for their own good. And this number right here, this really puts the Egyptian reverence for gold into perspective. 110 kilograms. That's about 242 pounds. That's how much solid gold was in King Tut's coffin alone. Think about that. They buried a teenager in what would be millions upon millions of dollars worth of gold today. It's just staggering. So, what did the Romans do when their gold mines started running dry? Well, they invented something called debasement. They started secretly mixing cheaper metals, like copper, into their gold coins. This let them stretch their budget, sure, but they were also quietly devaluing their own money. This was basically one of the world's first experiments with inflation, because with more, less valuable coins floating around, the prices for everything else, they inevitably had to go up. This obsession just kept rolling on for centuries. When the Spanish conquistadors got to the Americas, they found these cultures that were just swimming in gold. But here's the tragic part. Where the Aztecs and Incas saw sacred art that told the story of their people, the Spanish saw only a commodity. They just melted down these irreplaceable, priceless artifacts into plain old gold bars to ship back to Spain.
Eventually, that same gold fever hit the United States. In 1848, gold was discovered in California. By 1849, the word was out, and it sparked an absolute mania. We're talking over 30,000 people, the 49ers, who just dropped everything. They left their jobs, their families, and rushed west, all with these incredible dreams of instant wealth.
But this whole episode reveals a timeless lesson about these kinds of gold rushes. The vast majority of those prospectors, they found little to nothing. In fact, most went home broke. The people who got truly rich were the ones selling the supplies. A guy named Sam Grannon became California's first millionaire, not by finding a single nugget of gold, but by selling pickaxes and shovels to all the dreamers. Okay, so with all this gold being dug up all over the world, nations needed a way to create some kind of stable financial system. The solution they came up with was the gold standard. The idea was simple. Your paper money was basically a claim check. You could, in theory, walk into a bank and exchange your paper dollars for a fixed amount of physical gold. It was a way to keep governments honest and stop them from just printing money recklessly. But this system was pretty fragile, and, well, it didn't last. World War I forced countries to jump off the standard, because you just can't fund a massive war and promise to redeem every dollar for gold. It doesn't work. Then, during the Great Depression, FDR actually outlawed private gold ownership to stop a run on the nation's dwindling reserves. After World War II, the world tried again, this time putting the US dollar at the center of everything. But eventually, that system cracked too, mainly because the US started creating way more paper dollars than it actually had gold in its vaults. Trust started to break down, and other countries began to call America's bluff. And it all came to a head on this one single day, August 15th, 1971. A day that would fundamentally change the nature of money for everyone, forever. That night, President Richard Nixon went on television and announced that the U.S. was officially closing the gold window. What that meant was that foreign countries could no longer show up and exchange their U.S. dollars for American gold. And just like that, with that one sentence, the gold standard, which had governed world finance for generations, was dead.
The aftermath was immediate and, frankly, explosive. For the first time in modern history, the price of gold was set by the free market, not by a government peg. And it just surged. It went from a fixed $35 an ounce in 1971 to a staggering $850 an ounce by 1980. Severing that link to gold really opened the floodgates for money creation on a scale that would have been completely unimaginable before. I want you to think about this statistic for a second. 40%. 40% of all US dollars that have ever existed were printed in just 2 years, between 2020 and 2022. That's something that is simply impossible under a gold standard. But here's where things get really interesting today. A strange paradox has emerged. The very institutions that control the money printers, I'm talking about the world's central banks, have quietly become the biggest buyers of physical gold. Countries like China, Russia, and India are adding hundreds and hundreds of tons to their national reserves. And this leads us to the great, puzzling question of our time. If the system of government-backed paper money is so stable and so secure, why are the very people in charge of that system converting their paper back into that 5,000-year-old shiny rock? It just leaves us with this powerful observation, one that was made over a century ago. After 5,000 years of watching empires rise and fall, of seeing currencies get created and then destroyed, is it possible that this simple statement is just as true today as it was all the way back then?